It's hard to know exactly what his role is going to be. I mean, at this time, Puka was kind of establishing himself as maybe a breakout guy, especially with Kupp getting hurt in camp. But Jordan Whittington, he's kind of that versatile, like blocking receiver who does the dirty work, and he can do some stuff on returns and really just kind of be a versatile receiver, not necessarily someone who's going to be a deep threat over the top or any type of specialist. But Cooper Kupp talked about it yesterday in his interview. He's been really impressed with Whittington, and Whittington ran with the ones yesterday at times, and he made a catch against Tre'Davious White in practice on a throw from Mathew Stafford. So that's kind of surprising to see him rising that quickly.
What?
Why are you shaking your head?
You're welcome.
The Rams lost perhaps the best defensive player of this century to retirement, but their veteran quarterback is still playing at the highest level. Around Matthew Stafford, the Rams have some very productive fantasy players, but does third-round rookie running back Blake Corum throw a wrench into Kyren Williams' league-winning potential? And are you underrating LA's third wide receiver, Demarcus Robinson? USA Today's Cam Da Silva gave me all kinds of insight into Sean McVay's boys. My name is Joe Dolan. Like this video, leave a comment, and subscribe to the Fantasy Points YouTube channel for 32 fantasy football breakdowns of all 32 NFL teams. This is the fantasy franchise focus for the Los Angeles Rams. So, Cameron, obviously right here on this podcast last year, this YouTube series, whatever you want to call it, you kind of put us on to Sean McVay loves Kyren Williams. Loves him. Turns out Kyren Williams ends up being one of the single most valuable assets in all of fantasy football last year. And the Rams tend to get that out of their backfield, whether it's been Todd Gurley, Sony Michel, Darrell Henderson, CJ Anderson. But they kind of go through Cam Akers. They go through these phases of guys being bell cow running backs, and then they kind of move on to the next one. So Kyren Williams' production last year dictates he basically should be a first-round pick for fantasy. But he's not. He's a third-round pick because they drafted Blake Corum. What is your read on this backfield this season? Should we still expect Kyren to be the guy, or is Blake Corum a significant threat to Kyren's upside?
No, I think Kyren's still going to be the guy. Interestingly, Sean McVay has talked several times about how similar Corum and Kyren are as players. And I mean, you can see it when you watch them play. They're kind of smaller backs, still have some good power, plenty of shiftiness, and just kind of a nose for the end zone. But with Blake being a similar player, I think that almost bodes better for Kyren than it would have been if they drafted like a third down specialist or like a power back or someone who has a completely different skill set where they have a plan to get him on the field in different ways than Kyren. With Blake Corum, I think he's almost like an insurance policy for Kyren because Kyren has gotten hurt several times. He broke his foot as a rookie, sprained his ankle as a rookie. What was it? His ankle again last year. He hurt his foot in OTAs this year, broke his hand in the playoff loss to the Lions. So he's not the most durable guy. And they want someone who can just get plugged in when Kyren's out and operate the same offense. So I still think Kyren's going to be the guy. As you mentioned, Sean McVay loves bell cows. He doesn't like to rotate these backs. He likes to ride the guy who's playing well and has established himself as a starter. And we saw Darrell Henderson as a third-round pick when he was a rookie with Todd Gurley still there. And, I mean, he didn't really do much as a rookie. So it's not like just because Blake is a third-round pick, he's guaranteed to have this massive role behind Kyren or that he's going to unseat him. He might be more athletic or a little bit faster, what have you. But Kyren is established in this offense, and Sean McVay, again, like you said, loves him. I mean, he's such a big fan of this guy. So obviously the pick of Corum is not encouraging if you're a Kyren fan or you have him in Dynasty, but I wouldn't worry too much as long as Kyren does stay healthy.
What's going on with Matthew Stafford with the contract? We're recording this, by the way, on July 26th. So by the time you listen to this, we could get the full details out there. But I believe Sean McVay said he's agreed to a restructure. Do we know what that is at this point?
Yeah, Yeah, we don't have the details yet, but the deal is agreed to. At least it's not necessarily put pen to paper. I haven't seen any official numbers or anything like that. Um, Interestingly, Mathew was not seemingly very excited when he was talking about it at his press conference this week. Just kind of
Oh,
like,
no.
I'm happy to be here, happy to play in football. It was a good agreement, yada, yada. Not super thrilled about it. I don't know if that's just his nature or if it really wasn't a great deal for him. But yeah, I mean, it's agreed to. What he wanted was security beyond the 2024 season. He wanted some more guaranteed money to kind of ensure that the Rams were going to stick by him. And I think that's an indication of him wanting to play longer than maybe some people expect him to. If you watched him last year, there's no sign of him slowing down at all. I mean, he was as good as any quarterback I watched last year. And even though the numbers don't show that, he was just picking apart defenses, throwing everywhere, all over the field. I mean, obviously having Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua helps, but those guys I don't think would be the receivers that they are without Stafford. So um, Charles Robinson of Yahoo reported some details about the contract where he gets more money this year up front, and then it lowers the cap hit for Stafford in 2025 if the Rams do move on or if he retires, which is interesting because that sounds like the opposite of what Mathew wanted to accomplish. But we'll wait to see kind of what the full details are on that deal.
So, in terms of Matthew Stafford, are you operating as somebody who covers the Rams as if this is a year-to-year proposition with Stafford, and it's just he could be here next year, he could decide that after this year it's in. Is that an accurate read?
I think, yeah, to an extent, because I don't remember if it was McVay or Snead kind of indicated that earlier this offseason. But like I mentioned, he's playing so well, and as long as he can stay healthy, I mean, the arm strength is still there. He reads defenses well. He really cut down on the turnovers last year in a significant way. I think he had 11 interceptions, but didn't fumble the ball once, not even just dropping the ball. I mean, he didn't lose a fumble. He didn't have any fumbles. So he's really elevated himself in that way. Um, this contract is kind of going to give us an indication of how serious he and the Rams are about continuing beyond 2024, because if Robinson's report is accurate and they lowered the cap hit, the dead money, if he retires or if he gets cut, that doesn't really give him any security for coming back next year. But the Rams love having him as their quarterback. Sean McVay loves him. They're a great team essentially between him and McVay and Stafford. And I personally can't see him going anywhere in 2025, but that's kind of dependent on A, this contract, and B, how he plays this year.
So let's talk those receivers. We obviously know Cooper Kupp is an all-timer. Had the Triple Crown a couple of years ago, and Puka Nacua is an all-time great rookie, like breaking all kinds of records. Just from a fantasy perspective, Puka Nacua is a first-round pick. Cooper Kupp is going in like the third or fourth round. Do you think that's fair?
It's so hard to get a feel of what these guys are going to be when they're both healthy and playing all season together. When they were both playing last year, I think the target split was pretty similar. Puka might have had like 10 more targets than Cooper, but Kupp was not healthy. I mean, he said last offseason he was just not healthy with the hamstring. He started the year late, and he just never got back to being himself. And you could see him hobbling a little bit. McVay said earlier this offseason that people don't realize what he was battling through. So I think we can almost kind of throw away last season as any sort of sign of what's to come for Kupp. I think he's going to be much healthier this offseason. He's talked about it, how good it feels to be fully healthy for an offseason program for the first time since 2021. So he's kind of on the right track. And we know how much Matthew Stafford loves him in the red zone. They have such a good rapport where Kupp knows where the ball is going to be and Stafford knows where Kupp is going to be. So their rapport in the red zone is really, really good. Better than what Stafford has with Nacua. So they're neck and neck to me, honestly. I wouldn't separate them by 2 rounds like they're being separated right now, personally.
So, but then my question would be the issues that Cooper Kupp has had. Do we worry that they linger? He is getting older. He just turned 31 in June. Hey, look, I turned 38 2 days ago. And like I have my core is sore from coughing too much the last 2 weeks. So I'm not trying to criticize the shape Cooper Kupp is in, but he is playing professional football. Do you worry that maybe these are long-term issues for him?
Yeah, it's always something with him. He's had the ACL, he's had ankle sprains, he had the hamstring last year. it just always seems like there's a little something nagging at him other than 2021 when he was healthy and he had a record-setting season. I think a good handcuff, if you are going to go with Kupp, is Demarcus Robinson. He's their number 3 receiver and kind of getting slept on a little bit. So with Kupp's concerns about durability a little bit, if you can't get Puka, I think Demarcus Robinson is a good handcuff to have along with Kupp. And I mean, you never know how healthy a guy is going to stay. Puka was banged up a little bit last year, even though he didn't miss a game. He just plays such a physical style. But you just got to kind of hope that Kupp is over this little injury bug and gets back to the way he was in 2021.
I want to talk a little bit more about Demarcus Robinson. He's a guy who's bounced around the NFL. I mean, he's been on 4 or 5 teams and never really, we saw flashes with him, especially when he was with the Chiefs a couple of years ago, but never really what we saw on a consistent basis the way he did with the Rams. What did he give to this offense? And why do you think Sean McVay, or has Sean McVay kind of said anything about how they've unlocked his skill set?
Yeah, I don't know specifically what it was. Kupp talked about it yesterday. He just thinks it took DeMarcus a little bit of time in training camp and early in the season to kind of grasp the offense, because it is such a unique scheme. But in the second half of the year, particularly like the last 5 or 6 games, he emerged as their number 3 receiver and really played well. He's kind of sneaky fast. He's got some downfield speed. He can run a good route tree, and his rapport with Stafford really improved throughout the year. And especially working over the middle, like these dig routes and slants and almost these like physical catches over the middle where you're in traffic. Stafford can really trust Robinson to make those plays. And with so much attention being paid to Kupp and Puka, DeMarcus kind of flies under the radar a little bit, doesn't get double teamed. He can play the X receiver spot. He can line up in the slot. So they can do a few different things with him. And I think he played really well at the end of last season. The Rams liked him enough to bring him back. And he's just kind of a glue guy in the locker room among those receivers, and someone who's never missed the playoffs in his career. So he has experience in these big games too.
Obviously, everybody wants to know from us fantasy guys, who's next year's Cooper Kupp, right? Well, the easy answer is there isn't one, because he just broke every rookie receiving record there is. But I have to ask, because the Rams did draft a wide receiver in the 6th round in Jordan Whittington. What does he bring? What have you seen from him? And have the coaches said anything about him?
Yeah, it's hard to know exactly what his role is going to be. I mean, at this time, Puka was kind of establishing himself as maybe a breakout guy, especially with Kupp getting hurt in camp. But Jordan Whittington, he's kind of that versatile, like blocking receiver who does the dirty work, and he can do some stuff on returns and really just kind of be a versatile receiver, not necessarily someone who's going to be a deep threat over the top or any type of specialist. But Cooper Kupp talked about it yesterday in his interview. He's been really impressed with Whittington, and Whittington ran with the ones yesterday at times, and he made a catch against Tre'Davious White in practice on a throw from Mathew Stafford. So that's kind of surprising to see him rising that quickly on only the 2nd day of camp. Granted, they do have Puka and Cooper Kupp and Demarcus Robinson and Tutu Atwell still there, but maybe Whittington has already overtaken Tutu kind of as that 4th receiver and someone who might just be one injury away from being a starter because of how frequently the Rams use 11 personnel and always have 3 receivers on the field.
We saw Tutu Atwell make more plays last year than he had before. Still just 24 years old. It feels like he's been around since Oz Hakeem was in a Ram uniform. But Atwell, do you think he's a guy who benefits, and his roster status benefits from the fact that there's the new kickoff return rule this year?
Yeah, he talked about it earlier this week that we're going to see him on kickoff returns. I don't know if that's necessarily just in practice or if the Rams are committed to him as being their kick returner, but with it being more like an offensive play and you can get him in space a little bit, and it might benefit him and keep him on that roster, even if he isn't one of those top 3, top 4 receivers on the team. He's got to find a way to carve out a role somehow, which you don't exactly want to say about a 2nd round pick in his 4th season, but they got to find ways to kind of incorporate him. And it feels a little bit like Tavon Austin when McVay was there, just trying to get him involved any way they can. But he just hasn't been able to carve out a role. I mean, he did some things last year when Kupp was injured, but just didn't stick around after Kupp came back. And we'll see how he does this season.
So, this statement I'm about to make is gonna let you know how big a fantasy football sicko I am, and it might have you convinced that I am absolutely nuts. We have not named the LA Ram I have drafted the most for fantasy football yet.
I think I
His
know
name
who.
is Colby
Yep.
Parkinson.
Yeah, I knew you were going to say
And
that.
they signed him to a 3-year deal, 22.5 million. Obviously, some of those numbers are phony, fake numbers. Tyler Higbee tore his ACL in January. I mean, he's over 30. He might be done for all we know. Davis Allen is in his second year, but they went out, signed a guy in Parkinson who they saw 2 times a year across the field with Seattle. Am I nuts for he's a last round pick for fantasy, so I'm not like drafting him in the 5th round or anything. Am I nuts for investing in Colby Parkinson?
No, in the last round, how many starters are you going to find? I mean, he's going to be a starting tight end unless Higbee miraculously recovers from a torn ACL and MCL in 8 months. Parkinson is going to be a starting tight end, and as much as Davis Allen has promise and potential as a second-year guy, they don't really run 2 tight end sets very much. They use 11 personnel with 3 receivers, a running back, and a tight end. And Colby Parkinson is a big target. He's got a wide catch radius. He can be a really good weapon for Stafford, especially in the red zone. He's a guy I really, really like. And he didn't do much in Seattle, kind of blocked by other guys on the depth chart at tight end. But like you mentioned, the Rams saw him twice a year. Their former offensive coordinator, Shane Waldron, was the OC in Seattle. So maybe some insight there about what type of player he can be. And I mean, like I mentioned, that late in the draft, how many guys are you going to find there are legitimate starters in the NFL at tight end? So he's a guy I would certainly watch in the beginning of the season and see how he does, because we don't know when Higbee's going to be back.
What's Davis Allen's skill set? What does he need to work on? Just because I feel like that's the biggest threat to Parkinson having a role here.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately for fantasy guys looking at Parkinson, Allen is a better receiver than he is a blocker. He's got a big catch radius as well, just kind of like a big wiry frame. And he did get some playing time last year as a rookie and played well and made some important catches and looked pretty agile on his feet after he did make these catches and get into the open field. So that might be a threat to Parkinson a little bit. Parkinson's a better blocker, which you need your tight end to be, especially in 11 personnel when you're going to be running the ball out of those packages. But Allen he's a promising young player who has a wide catch radius and some good hands, and he could be a guy to watch in the red zone as well.
You've mentioned Kyren Williams' injury history, which is one of the reasons they certainly drafted Blake Corum. Blake Corum has an injury history himself, though. Of Boston Scott, Ronnie Rivers, and Zach Evans, who has the best shot to be the number 3 running back here?
I would go with Ronnie Rivers. Boston Scott might be a guy to keep for the Rams to keep for the new kickoff rule. He has some return experience, so he might be someone who can work on kickoff returns. Ronnie Rivers is kind of a little bit of a different back. He's smaller, but he's shiftier. He's a good receiver. Zach Evans, he's a fun player, but the Rams just didn't trust him last year. Even after Kyren went down, even after Ronnie Rivers went down, they went out and signed Darrell Henderson, who just did not look good and really didn't give Zach Evans any opportunities to carry the ball. So I would go with Ronnie Rivers out of that group as being the third back.
So I haven't talked a lot about defense on this because it doesn't really matter that much for fantasy purposes, but obviously the Rams just lost maybe the best defensive player of the 21st century to retirement in Aaron Donald. Could this unit give up a decent amount of points, which would then indicate that they have to score more points to try to compete? I mean, replacing Aaron Donald is not easy. What's your outlook for the defense?
Yeah, I mean, there's some questions about the defense, especially without Donald, like you mentioned. The pass rush is something that's going to need to improve, and you have a lot of young guys: Kobe Turner, Byron Young, Jared Verse. So those guys are going to have to step up. The secondary should be better. It just wasn't a great group last year with Akella Witherspoon and Darian Kendrick. They brought in Trey White. They brought in Darius Williams. So the secondary should be better against the pass, especially with the teams that they're going to be facing this year. But it's not going to be the same without Aaron Donald. I mean, he draws double and triple teams all the time. and the other guys around him are not going to have that luxury of getting one-on-one matchups all the time. So the defense could take a little bit of a step back, but I think overall the whole group is collectively better than it was last season, even without Donald.
Offensive line injuries the last couple of years have been a disaster for the Rams. They go out, they make a couple of draft picks, but day 3 guys. The big addition is left guard Jonah Jackson. Do you think he's going to be somebody who that this line can kind of coalesce around and make it a better unit than it has been in recent years?
Yeah, I mean, the Rams don't get talked about a lot with their offensive line, but I think it could be one of the better groups in the league. Steve Avila is moving from left guard to center because they did sign Jonah Jackson to play left guard, which surprised me. I mean, I saw that news come down on free agency the first day, and I was surprised by it. But I think collectively it's a really good group, really big offensive linemen in the middle. So when you have a smaller back like Kyren Williams, he can almost get lost behind those guys in the middle when they do run these inside zones and up the middle carries. Alaric Jackson at left tackle is a little bit of a question mark. They brought him back on that 1-year tender. And then Rob Havenstein at right tackle is a really solid, underrated player in the league. So I think it has the potential to be one of the better offensive lines in the league.
Yeah, Jonah Jackson, by the way, you mentioned how they have these big, strong, powerful guys inside. Jonah Jackson's 6'3" and 315. He's by far the smallest of the interior offensive linemen.
Avila's a massive center. I mean, he's going to be a big guy in the middle, which is different from what the Rams have had.
Yeah, that's going to be fascinating to watch. But obviously, Cameron DeSilva is going to be watching and updating you on everything LA Rams in training camp, the preseason, and of course into the regular season. He is the managing editor of the Rams Wire with USA Today, and you can follow him on Twitter at Cam DaSilva, D-A Silva. Cam, thank you so much for joining me. Go enjoy Rams training camp, and we'll catch up with you soon.
Thanks, man. I appreciate you having me on.